holographic superconductors, and this is the plan of my talk. I shall first talk about some basics of superconductivity, which all of us know, and then I shall be talking about the holographic principle, and then constructing gravitational duals for holographic superconductors, and then I shall discuss something called the probe limit. I shall explain all these things carefully later, and then the basic setup, which is based upon formulating a Sturm-Liouville problem. And then the primary aim of our work is the following, of doing this whole thing is the following, that one tries to obtain a relation between the critical temperature and the charge density, and then one also tries to obtain an expression for the condensation operator, and then I shall give a summary of the results that we have obtained, and if time permits, I shall also be talking about an alternative approach which is known as the matching method, and then I shall talk about the work that is in progress and future directions that one can work about. So this is basically the plan of my talk. So let me start with the basics of superconductivity. So the phenomena all of us know is that the electrical resistivity of some metals suddenly drops to zero when the temperature is lowered below a certain temperature, which is called the critical temperature. And this was experimentally first found around 1911 by Kamerlingh-Onnes. And there is another independent property of this superconductor, is that magnetic field is expelled when the temperature is lowered below the critical temperature. And this is the Meissner effect. And these are two actually independent properties of the superconductor. And a phenomenological description of both the above properties was first provided by the London brothers around 1935. And they just gave a single equation that the current density is proportional to the vector potential, and from there they could independently derive both these properties for the superconductor. And then around 1950, Landau-Ginzburg described superconductivity in terms of a second order phase transition whose order parameter is a complex scalar field phi. And the crucial thing in their work was the assumption that the contribution of this complex scalar field phi to the free energy is given by this form. This is the contribution of the complex scalar field phi to the free energy, where alpha and beta are positive constants. Now it is easy to see that for temperature greater than the critical temperature, the minimum of the free energy is at phi is equal to 0. But when the temperature is lower, below the critical temperature, the minimum of the free energy can be obtained for a non-zero value of phi, and therefore you have a non-zero value for the condensate. And this was the phenomenological another theory which was provided by Landau and Ginzburg around 1950. But a more complete microscopic description was given by BCS, Bardeen-Cooper-Schiffer, in 1957, and they actually managed to describe low TC, low critical temperature materials having low TC, critical temperature, and they provided, actually what they did was they provided a mechanism for this superconductivity for low TC superconductors, and the mechanism was the formation of Cooper pairs. So we have a spin, there is an interaction, and an electron with up spin and an electron with down spin can bind together, and the thing which binds the two electrons is nothing but the phonon. So it is a phonon mediated interaction. But it is actually very tightly, very loosely bound. It's a very loosely bound pair. So what we have is a charged boson now, and below the critical temperature, the bosons can condense, and thus gives rise to this post-condensate. And so we have this second order phase transition. It was a completely microscopic theory and a breakthrough in 1957. And now, in the superconducting ground state, there is an energy gap delta for charged excitations. So what we mean by this is that, and this energy gap delta for charged excitation is related to the critical temperature in this way. Delta is approximately 1.7 Tc. So this is an experimental result. What this energy gap is the energy gap is the following. So I can just excite, if a photon of frequency hits omega hits a superconductor in the superconducting ground state, this charged boson can be excited, and two quasi-particles are created in the excited state. And then the energy of both these quasi-particles is basically can be estimated. This omega g is equal to twice delta. The delta is the energy gap. And delta is related to the critical temperature by this relation. So you have omega g is twice delta, so it is 3.5 Tc. So this is an experimental result for low Tc superconductors. Now for high Tc superconductors, they were first discovered in 1986 by Bednorz and Muller, and they got the Nobel Prize in 87. I thank my wife for letting me know this just yesterday, and I just put the reference here. She gave me the reference. And materials like cuprates, the materials that they discovered were materials, were compounds of copper compounds, so called cuprates. And here the superconductivity is found along the copper oxide planes, and the critical temperature is now quite high, 134 Kelvin. The problem with these materials is the following: the pairing mechanism is not well understood here, because it turns out that it is a strongly coupled system. And at present, condensed matter theorists have very little tools to understand such, they don't have a complete microscopic theory for high Tc superconductors, like the BCS theory you have for low Tc superconductors. So here comes the input from a new theoretical input, at least a first step, from gauge gravity duality. This provides a new tool to understand, at least one claims that it provides a new tool to understand high Tc superconductors. Now what is the aim? The aim is to construct simple gravity models using the gauge gravity correspondence and show that they are able to produce at least some of the properties of superconductors. This is the aim. So one proposes simple gravity models, and then uses the gauge gravity correspondence, and one finds that they are able to produce some properties of superconductors. But now I would like to mention a caution here. These models that one proposes are actually too crude to make any detailed comparison with any real world material. So if I am unable to explain most of the properties of that the material physicists look for, so if they try to attack me, I will say that no, I will surrender. So I don't claim that it will reproduce all the properties. So the basic idea is quite simple. One considers a 3 plus 1 dimensional gravity theory in the bulk, which is dual to a 2 plus 1 dimensional boundary theory. This is a holographic principle, which I will just come later in the next slide. And this would be the right context to understand the superconductivity associated with the 2-dimensional planes that you have in the high Tc cuprates. So this is all about the basics of superconductivity that I wanted to mention. So let me just briefly mention what is the holography principle. The first question is, what is holography? The theory of quantum gravity on certain space-time, at least like, this is the statement that in which the string theorists propose. Theory of quantum gravity on certain space-time, known as ADS space-time, is equivalent to a conformally invariant quantum field theory in one less dimension. So why is this statement so important? What is so profound about this statement? The reason that this is a profound statement is that quantum gravity still is not a very well understood subject. We don't understand it. It is a difficult subject. Whereas quantum field theory is a very difficult subject though. But even though it is a difficult subject, we at least the field theorists think that they understand it. So you have some hold on it. So that is the reason that if you have some hold on quantum field theory, then at least you can, if the correspondence is right, if it can be proved, if it holds really, then you can make some conclusions or some predictions about the quantum gravity theory from a quantum field theory in the boundary. And what's more is that duality reduces the number of dimensions also. So you have to work with a theory which has one less dimension. So here is the more complete statement of the ADS-CFT correspondence or the gauge gravity duality. So this is just a restatement, but it's a more complete statement. So let me now come to the next point, what holographic superconductors are, and how do we go about constructing holographic superconductors in the first place. The name suggests that one can look at a 2 spatial dimensional superconductor and see a 3-dimensional image. And the image one sees, quote unquote sees, you don't really see it like in experiments, but at least theoretically one can say that the image one sees is quite striking. It involves a black hole with a non-trivial hair. Now I will explain what I mean by here. Now, how do we go about constructing a holographic dual for a superconductor? That is, how do we get hold of a black hole with a non-trivial hair? Now, the minimal ingredients in getting a holographic dual for a superconductor are the following. In the superconductor, we need a notion of temperature. This is the basic ingredient that we require. On the gravity side, that role is played by a black hole. In the 1970s, all of us know that Hawking, following the work of Wittgenstein, he showed that stationary black holes are basically thermodynamic objects and they can have a temperature. So the black hole has a Hawking temperature, and therefore this temperature of the black hole is the temperature of the boundary field theory. So the temperature of the black hole basically provides the temperature of the superconductor that is sitting on the boundary of the theory. The next thing that one requires to get hold of superconductors is the following. In the superconductor, we also need a condensate. In the bulk, that is in the gravity theory, this condensate is basically described by some field coupled to gravity. A non-zero condensate corresponds to a static non-zero field outside a black hole. This is usually called black hole hair. This is what I mean by hair of a black hole. Hence, to describe a superconductor, what is important is the following. We need a black hole that has hair at low temperatures, but no hair at high temperatures. Then only we will have the phase transition. This is the basic thing that we need. So I need to get hold of a black hole which has a hair at low temperature, below a certain critical temperature, and the hair should vanish when the temperature is increased above the critical temperature.
So you mean the black hole
has some field outside.
Some field outside.
Has some field outside. Now there is a problem. There is a problem here. The problem is the following. There are no hair theorems which says that certain matter fields must be trivial outside a black hole. What this basically means in simple words is that stationary black holes are described only by their conserved charges, by three conserved charges: mass, spin, and angular momentum. And there can be no other field which can live outside the stationary black hole. The idea is very simple, because if I have a field living outside, just living outside the black hole, the field will either fall into the particle, the quanta of the field will fall into the black hole, or otherwise it will be Hawking radiated to infinity. So there can be no hair living outside a black hole, no other matter field living outside a black hole. However, the way out of this problem is the following. The catch is the following. However, there are no general no-hair theorems. Each matter field has to be considered separately. For example, it was shown that a static Yang-Mills field can actually exist outside the horizon, and this is the reference that I have given.
This should not be a no-hair because it is a gauge field. Yang-Mills is a gauge field.
Right.
No-hair excludes the gauge field.
Sorry?
No-hair theorem, the statement of the no-hair theorem excludes the gauge fields.
Okay.
So,
So
it is just like a
Also, is there a restriction of the space outside the black hole? Is there a black hole in a box, or is it a black hole?
the black hole should be asymptotically ADS. I will be coming now. It should not be a flat black hole. Yes.
So in this approach, is it generically true that any of the quantum hairs you can map it to a non-zero hair of the corresponding field?
Sorry?
So is there this non-zero vacuum expectation value of the corresponding field? Because
Yeah. There is a non-zero vacuum expectation value of this
so
corresponding
that is
field.
the generic approach you are taking for
Yeah.
all the quantum hairs.
Yeah. No, this point, as Saurabh mentioned, so you don't regard the Yang-Mills field as the gauge field as a hair.
for example, Reissner-Nordstrom is not a hairy black hole. It's a exact system. Because Maxwell field is gauge field.
Right, but this is a complex scalar field. This is a matter field. It's not a, what we are considering is a matter field.
Not a gauge field.
It's not a gauge field, it's a matter field.
Yang-Mills.
But this we shall not be dealing with Yang-Mills field. Because the solution is separate actually. Because this will not actually give the solution. This will not give rise to a condensate. In any case, this is not going to give rise to a condensate. So we shall require something else. Actually, so the solution was first provided by Gupta. What he considered, he gave the following action. And as you can all see that this action is just GR with a negative cosmological constant. This is minus 3 by L square, and coupled to a Maxwell field and charge scalar with mass m and charge q. So here psi is the complex charge scalar field. This is the Maxwell field, and this is the GR part with a negative cosmological constant. and it is actually easy to see. I think I should write it is not actually easy to see, but anyway, why black holes in this theory might be unstable to forming scalar here. For an electrically charged black hole, the effective mass of psi, this thing here, this is the mass term, the effective mass of psi is given by m square effective, m square plus q square gtt at square. So you have a term coming from this term which adds up to this term to give an effective mass. And this last term, the second term is negative, so there is a chance that m square effective becomes sufficiently negative near the horizon to destabilize the field. And one might wonder why such a simple type of hair was actually not noticed earlier. The reason for this is the following. The above mechanism does not work for asymptotically flat black holes, as you have asked. The mechanism only works for the asymptotically ADS black holes. So the ADS boundary conditions are crucial here. And I can explain, maybe I'll just give a short explanation why the ADS boundary conditions are crucial here. Because the electric field due to this charge Q of the black hole and the small q, the product of this thing, the electric field near the horizon may be so large that they can pull pairs of oppositely charged particles. And the positively charged particle will get repelled away and the negatively charged particle will be attracted towards the black hole of having a positive charge. And if the boundary conditions, if the space-time is asymptotically flat, then the positive charged particles will get repelled away to infinity. But the ADS boundary conditions actually plays a crucial role because they act like a confining box, and therefore it gets trapped, and this gives rise to the condensate actually. So here the ADS thing becomes important. And the final thing that I would like to mention is what do I mean by probe limit? It is nothing but it basically neglects the back reaction of the matter fields on the space-time. So we shall make a simplification of the problem and work in the probe limit, which neglects the back reaction of the matter field on the space-time. So this is what the probe limit is. More technically, it can be written in this term, but I shall not go into it. So now I come to the basic setup of doing this whole thing. The basic setup is the following. We shall work with the metric of a planar Schwarzschild ADS black hole, and the reason why we take a planar Schwarzschild ADS black hole, this is the planar part, is quite simple because we want to explain superconductivity along planes. The metric for which is given by this form, and the Hawking temperature can be easily computed from this metric by just taking a derivative of this and evaluating it at the horizon, and this is the Hawking temperature. Now the Lagrangian density of a charged complex scalar field in the background of a Schwarzschild ADS black hole can be expressed in the following form. Now here in our work what we have done is replaced the Maxwell term by a Born-Infeld term. So Born-Infeld theories have been discussed earlier in this workshop. So this is actually important, and it takes into account, it is a nonlinear theory which has very good properties, such as it is a theory for which the self-energy for a charged point particle is not infinite, it does not blow up. So it has very good properties, and also it captures the effects of nonlinearity on holographic superconductors. So this is the Lagrangian density for the Born-Infeld electrodynamics, and here small v is the Born-Infeld parameter, and it is a small parameter. It seems quite, if I take the small b0 limit, the b0 limit, it goes back, if I set b to 0, it goes back to the usual Maxwell electrodynamics. Now we would like to make an ansatz that we just have an electric scalar potential, mu is phi r, and we take this psi, the matter field, the charged scalar field, to be psi of r, function of r only. So this is just an ansatz, and then if we take this ansatz and work out the equations of motion following from the full action, we'll end up with the following equations for psi and phi. So this is the equation for, these are two coupled ordinary nonlinear differential equations for psi, for the matter field psi, and the electric scalar potential phi. So these are the two equations that we get here, and the main aim is to solve these differential equations. It is very difficult, hard to solve these differential equations, but we shall try to get hold of these equations in some way. So in order to proceed further, we also need some boundary conditions on the electric scalar potential phi and psi. Boundary conditions at the horizon are phi of RH should be equal to 0 and psi should be this. Now I can just explain this later actually. This is not very difficult to understand why phi, the electric scalar potential, should vanish at the horizon. The argument is simple, but I think I will not have much time. So maybe later on I can just explain. So these are the boundary conditions for the electric scalar potential and psi at the horizon. And now we also need, I shall come in the next transparency, that we also need boundary conditions at the asymptotic limit, in the r tending to infinite limit. So that I will mention later. But just a simple transformation under the change of coordinates z is equal to r plus by r, the above field equations can be rewritten in this z form. Why we are doing this thing, it will be clear in a moment. So now let me discuss the boundary conditions near the boundary, that is near z tending to 0 and r tending to infinity. So near this thing, z tending to 0, one can check that these field equations, the asymptotic behavior of these field equations, the ones written down in the z coordinates, the asymptotic form takes the following form. Phi goes like this, in terms of r it goes like this, in terms of z it goes like this, and psi goes like this. These are the asymptotic forms of those field equations, where delta plus minus are nothing but they are the conformal dimension of the condensation operator J in the boundary field theory. And now comes the important part. So these two asymptotic forms are very important. The important part is the following. We now make interpretations from gauge gravity dictionary. Now the gauge gravity dictionary comes into play. The coefficients psi minus and psi plus in this equation, psi minus and psi plus, correspond to the vacuum expectation values of the condensation operator J. More precisely, if psi minus corresponds to the condensate in the boundary, if psi minus corresponds to the condensate in the boundary, then psi plus corresponds to adding a source for this operator in the conformal field theory. And mu and rho are interpreted, the interpretation comes from gauge gravity duality. Mu and rho are interpreted as the chemical potential and the charge density of the dual theory on the boundary. Now we shall make a short simplification. We shall set m squared to minus 2. And if we set m squared to minus 2, this m squared to minus 2, then one can work out this delta plus minus, and the delta minus is given by 1 and delta plus is given by 2. Now we can impose the boundary condition that psi minus or psi plus vanish, so that the theory is stable in the asymptotic radius region. What we have done is we have set psi plus to equal to 0 and j to be equal to psi minus. The condensation operator is my psi minus basically.
What is the m square?
M square is the mass of the complex scalar field that I showed in the first action.
So it becomes a tachyon, is it?
No, it is not a tachyon.
You said m squared is minus.
It's minus 2. So, no, this is actually means a.
You don't have a lambda 5 4.
No, there is no
m
lambda
squared
5.
is real mass. Square of the real is positive number, no?
No,
In radius space, between 0 and minus.
it is not a tachyon mass. It basically indicates
That
the
Is m
thing
squared
as
real? M is real?
m square is minus 2. So m is imaginary.
M is imaginary.
But it does not tell that it is a tachyon. But what it tells is that there is an instability in the theory. The instability is very important in getting the condensate. So in field theory this is quite common, I guess, because
It is essentially
an instability.
the parameter multiplying phi star phi.
Yeah.
Essentially,
So that's spontaneous.
continuous.
Why are you setting m squared to minus 2?
Sorry?
It's related to this. Why is m squared set to minus 2? Because in the previous transparencies,
Okay, this is just a choice.
delta comes from a certain ansatz, right? The delta which you derived in
Yeah.
the previous transparency.
Yeah,
Delta is derived by making a specific ansatz of expanding the fields from the
right,
boundary.
right. This is a general expression for delta plus minus in terms of m square.
And the mass is taken to be arbitrary and it's normally assumed to be positive. So why is
No, it is not. That is the point. If you assume it to be positive, then you will not get the instability in the theory, and you will not get the condensate. So you have to. The thing is that you have to set m square to minus 2, and then you will get that thing. Now there is a catch here. There is a Brighton-Lohner-Friedman bound. What it says is that if m square is greater than or equal to that Brighton-Lohner-Friedman bound, then your ADS theory is stable. And that bound is given by m square, the Broughton-Lunar bound is basically minus d by 4.
It's okay. This is the usual thing.
Yeah, this is the usual thing that is. So, now I was here, we shall set psi plus to 0 in our work, and we could have done the either way also, and j to be equal to this psi minus. This is because when we do this, when we choose this set of boundary conditions, what we have done essentially is the following. We want the condensate to turn on without being sourced. So if both were non-zero, then we could you would have told that the condensate is basically due to a source, but I don't require that below the critical temperature. I require the condensate to turn on without any source. So I set psi plus to 0 and j to be equal to psi minus. And now I come to from this basic setup, now I come to the main aim of our work. So how much time do we have? 15 minutes. So the main primary aim is to obtain a relation between critical temperature and charge density. So to do that, we shall work at the critical temperature Tc. At the critical temperature Tc, we just require the condensate has not yet formed. So we set psi to be equal to 0 in the equation for the phi that I've shown you. So just at the critical temperature, the matter field is not yet on, it is 0. So the field equation for the electrostatic potential reduces to the following form. One can integrate this equation, it's difficult to integrate, it's a nonlinear differential equation. One can integrate this differential equation to get a solution of this form, where you find this lambda is quite crucial, the lambda is given by this thing. So lambda is related to the charge density which comes from the ADS CFT dictionary. And if you solve this further, if you just move on, we can get a solution for phi z keeping terms up to first order in the Born-Infeld parameter. So phi of z is of this form, where it is easy to check, easy to see that it satisfies the boundary conditions at the horizon. Z is equal to 1, phi of 1 is 0. So this is just not an exact solution, it's a perturbative solution, approximate solution, a perturbative up to first order in Born-Infeld parameter. Now, what is done, the technical detail is the following. This solution that we have obtained for phi at the critical temperature when psi is equal to 0 is plugged into the equation for the matter field psi just away from the critical temperature, just near the critical temperature. And the field equation for the scalar field approaches this limit. This is the equation for the matter field that we obtained. And now once again we derive, near the boundary we define psi z in this way, where this z and f of z, and once again if we compare this psi z at the assigned in the r tending to 0, r tending to infinite limit, that is z tending to 0 asymptotic limit, then it turns out that f0 must be 1. So we just define psi z in terms of this and put this psi z in the equation for psi to get an equation for f now, where f should satisfy the boundary condition that f0 is 1 and f prime 0 should be 0. And this follows from some subsequent analysis that will follow. Now the interesting thing about this equation is that this equation can be put in a Sturm-Liouville form. This is a Sturm-Liouville form, that this equation can be recast in this form, where the coefficients p, q and r can be written down by just comparing from this. This can be immediately written down. So this equation now has been put in the Sturm-Liouville form. So we are trying to solve the problem, get a relation between the critical temperature and the charge density by formulating the whole problem in terms of a Sturm-Liouville problem. So now a bit of digression. If you write down this lambda, a functional for this lambda is a function of this y. If you write down an expression for this and extremize, this is just a simple exercise from calculus of variations. If you extremize this lambda, we get this Sturm-Liouville equation and the following boundary conditions. It is from here that the boundary condition for f prime comes. So what we immediately do is write down, we want to estimate this lambda square. We write down a functional for lambda square. And the functional is of this form because we have identified the forms of p, q and r. So this is the functional for lambda square. What we know is that if I extremize this lambda square, I get back this Sturm-Liouville equation, and there are boundary conditions. Now the trick is the following: we use a certain trial function now to get a value for this lambda square. The trial function that we choose has to be compatible with the boundary conditions, and f is basically taken in this way. It satisfies this boundary condition. This function satisfies the boundary conditions, and if we put it here and estimate then we can integrate this relation and get hold of lambda square as a function of this variational parameter alpha. And then what we do, we just extremize, we just find an for which value of alpha this lambda square takes an extremum. So we can estimate it. What we do essentially is differentiate lambda square with respect to alpha, set it equal to 0, get hold of the parameter for which it is an extremum, and then plug in the value of alpha in the expression for lambda square to get the value of lambda square. And we do it for these values of b. We first set b is equal to 0, the Born and infill parameter going to 0, and we keep on for which if I set b equal to 0, we get an expression for lambda square in terms of alpha like this. We extremize it, and the value for which this is an extremum is alpha is this thing. And we keep on doing this thing for different values of the Born infill parameters, for example 0.1 and 0.2. And once we have the value of lambda square, now so you can see that this lambda is related to the charge density in this way. So I have a value for this lambda square, and now critical temperature is related to R plus in this way. So I can replace R plus from this equation in terms of lambda. So I get a relation between Tc and rho, and this is the numerical parameter that we have estimated. So this gives us the relation between the critical temperature and the charge density rho. And for different Born infill parameters, we have calculated this, and our analytical results are actually in very good agreement with the numerical work that people have done. Now we move on to the next part. Another crucial part, the second aim of our work is to look at condensation values. We shall compute the condensation values of the condensation operator. Away from but close to the critical temperature, the field equation, now we are not exactly at the critical temperature. So psi is not equal to 0. The field equation for phi takes the following form. This is the field equation for phi. And now we expand this phi in the small parameter. This is a small parameter. So we expand phi in this way. And the expansion is of this following form, where we need to find a form for this chi of z. This is another function. So what we do, we just make this expansion in this parameter and plug this equation in this equation. If we do that, we get a differential equation for chi, which needs to be solved for these boundary conditions. How the boundary conditions, you can ask me later, I can just tell you, it's not very difficult to get them. So if we do that, if we solve this differential equation for chi, we get hold of chi prime at z is equal to 0. So this is the expression for chi prime at z is equal to 0. And now, from the expression for the asymptotic expression for phi and the expansion that I wrote just now, if you compare both sides of this equation, this part and the asymptotic relation for phi that I have written, from which comes from the ADS-CFT thing, if we just equate both of them, it's a matter of simple algebra, we get an expression which relates chi prime 0 in terms of the charge density and the condensation operator. Now comes the game of the condensation operator. And chi prime 0, we have already obtained an expression for chi prime 0 in terms of capital F. So if we do that, we can simplify this equation further. So this is the relation between charge density, the horizon radius, the eigenvalue lambda that we have estimated earlier, the condensation operator, and this A is given by this expression. And if we do that, the expression for the condensation operator from this equation can be simplified, and it takes the following form. This is the second order phase transition that we were looking after. So this is the form, this exactly is the form that we want, that we get in second order phase transition. Here is the critical temperature, and then we have a square root of 1 minus T by Tc. And this gamma is a parameter which we can now estimate exactly. Because I know all these things, A can be estimated, A we have estimated actually. We estimate this for B is equal to 0, which is the usual Maxwell theory. And then we do it for several other Born infill parameters. What we find that the value of this gamma actually increases. So the saturation value of this condensate is actually more for the when you increasing values of Born-Infeld parameter. Another thing that I did not mention earlier was the following, that you find from this the relation between DC and rho. For B is equal to 0, this coefficient is 0.225. When I increase the Born-Infeld parameter, the coefficient decreases. So the effect of the nonlinearity is the following. With the presence of the Born-Infeld parameter, the condensate is more difficult to form. It makes the condensate harder to form. And this is the result that we have.
Just one thing, could you please go to that? Here you see for bond 0.1, you get 0.223.
Yeah, I think this.
0.2, there must be some mistake.
Yeah, this actually decreases. This 4 is wrong actually.
Yeah, that's all.
This will decrease. This 0.221 or 0.220 something like that. So let me now summarize the results. So what we have done is, based on the Sturm-Liouville eigenvalue problem, we have performed analytic computation of holographic superconductors in Born-Infeld electrodynamics up to first order in the Born-Infeld coupling parameter. We have managed to obtain a relation between the critical temperature and the charge density, and this has been done through an iterative procedure. It has been observed that the Born-Infeld coupling parameter decreases the critical temperature of the condensate, indicating that it is harder for the scalar condensation to form in Born-Infeld electrodynamics. And the critical exponent, what is a very nice result. You also get the critical mean field result from the result for the critical exponent, which has been obtained by mean field calculations. The exponent is half. The critical exponent is half. You also recover that result in this analysis from this gauge gravity duality. So the critical exponent of the condensation operator also comes out to be half, which is the universal value in mean field theory.
But in your scheme of things, is the what role the Born-Infeld plays?
The Born-Infeld, actually we wanted to investigate the effect of nonlinearity. So it actually captures the effects of nonlinearity, and it shows that if I introduce the Born-Infeld parameter, then it tells us that there will be a certain regime when there will be no condensation, because the critical temperature slowly decreases with the increase of the Born-Infeld
So
parameter.
in general, that means it does not favor.
It does not favor the formation of, so it does not favor, that is also very important. So I think I have 2 minutes time, right? Yes. Okay, so let me just quickly go through this matching method also, because I kept it after the summary of my results. So I initially thought that I will not have much time to discuss this. So the matching method is an easier method than the Sturm-Liouville method. What essentially one does is, one makes near horizon expansion of the matter field. So you expand this matter field at about the horizon, about z is equal to 1. And you know the solution near the asymptotic region, it is of this form, psi minus j minus z, it goes as z. And now what you do, you just match these two solutions at some z is equal to zn. So this is not, and what should be the current value of zn, this is not clear. So there is some kind of arbitrariness. And so this method is not quite good, but it turns out that it gives quite good results. So if you do that, if you match these two solutions at some z is equal to zn, you get a relation of this form, and this finally leads, after once differentiating this equation once more, this finally leads to an expression for j minus in this form. And then the near horizon expansion of the field, you make a near horizon expansion of the electric scalar potential, match it with this thing, with this asymptotic solution at some z is equal to zn, and you get again some equation, and from these equations you get very cheaply, it's a very economic method actually, to get hold of this the relation between critical temperature and charge density, and you also get the expression for the condensation operator. And finally, I would like to mention the work which is in progress and what the future directions in which one can work. To relax the probe limit, that is to take into account the effect of back reactions. People have worked on it, but you can look at in other models also. To relax the probe limit, which implies including back reactions of the matter fields on the space-time. To include a magnetic field in the problem, this was first done by C.V. Johnson. So you can include a magnetic field in various models. To investigate the role of non-commutative geometry on the gauge gravity duality, open question. So the question which raised some controversy yesterday, that whether gauge gravity duality actually holds in case of non-commutative geometry. So this is an open question. and to investigate the role of higher dimensions on holographic superconductors. So these are the things that what one can work on, and the references are, these are the important papers that we have. And I'm very sorry, I should have mentioned earlier that I have the people with whom I have collaborated so far in this area is Dr. Dibakar Rai Chaudhary, and then Dr. Orindam Lala of this center, Professor Robin Banerjee of this center, and presently I am also working with Debabrata Ghorai, who is also an Inspire Fellow in this center. Thank you very much.
So if you have some comments or questions.
Doesn't this work relate to the work done by Olivera Miskovic in this Chilean school?
I think I heard the name Olivier, but I've not looked at the papers carefully. I think they are
There's
also
a group
working.
also.
Yeah, there is a group. There is a group. Yeah.
Chilean Walfred, so.
But one thing I should just mention is that in our country, we have actually first started this. Nobody worked in India actually. This holographic superconductor, myself, Dibakar, we have first started these things. But now, but there are groups in abroad. There were many groups who are doing these things, and they're using gauge gravity duality to do other things also, apart from holographic super. Shubir Shazdev is one of the. Shubir is.
That trial function that you chose
Yeah.
is, okay, has to be fitted with the boundary
Yeah.
conditions. But will any, say, beta trial function give you?
Yeah, a beta trial. The trial function that I have chosen is 1 minus alpha z square. But you see that this is the leading order, the first two leading order terms of cos alpha z square. So I could have used cosine alpha z square also as the trial function, which basically includes higher powers of z. So I could have done this, or separate trial functions could have been chosen which is compatible with the boundary conditions. But I think the results will be very near to what we have worked. So as you are pointing out that the trial function is definitely not unique. I could have chosen some.
This is also the first two terms of exponential minus z square.
Correct, right.
So the
Gaussian is
conventional problem of this duality issue which you are talking about is what you give in the gravity side. The dual theory is usually not known. That most of the, if you know this model, you don't know that model, and vice versa. So in your case, can you be sure that this is the dual model? Or whatever
No,
you have,
the claim is that we are not sure whether, means people are not sure that whether the gravity model means, you don't know what is living on the boundary, but it's a crude model which basically tells us that if I have a weakly coupled gravity theory in the bulk, then if you are able to manage, able to construct such weakly coupled gravity theories in the bulk, then the properties that they reproduce in the boundary mimic some of the properties of superconductors. They are mimicking, but actually it is not a superconductor also really, because the gauge symmetries in the bulk actually local gauge symmetry, local symmetries in the bulk map to global symmetries in the boundary. And therefore, it is not a, so it is a U1 global symmetry breaking in the boundary. So it is not really a superconductor also. It is a superfluid basically. So the claim is superconductor word should be taken in quote unquote.
Secondly, you put this phi is equal to 0 at the horizon.
Yeah.
Now, usually, if you take such boundary conditions, the operator which you get on the horizon in the gravity side, gravity theory, you don't get a self-adjoint operator for the Hamiltonian. That Hamiltonian, if you work out for the theory part, it is not. Usually, there's some reflecting thing has to come. Otherwise, there will be a problem. Or people who do this kind of a thing put ingoing boundary condition and then try to look for, if I do perturbations in the boundary.
But this phi is for the Maxwell field actually.
Right.
So, but this is not for the matter field. The phi is for the electric scalar potential. You set it to be 0 at the horizon. The phi is the matter, the electric field actually. It's not the
Also
matter
part of your.
It is part of the theory. But will it affect the self-adjointness? No.
Will definitely. In some sense, definitely it will affect. See, whatever beyond gravity is matter field. Even your electromagnetic field is part of matter.
Sure.
We will put it in the thing. We can't just ignore it.
Now, a naive argument of putting it, I did not mention at that time. You see, you want the quantity G mu, A mu, A mu. So all AX, AY, AZ are 0. You want only AT is surviving. So you want this to be finite at the boundary, but GTT is divergent at the horizon.
Right.
So AT must be 0. So that is a naive argument, but this argument is also quite not good actually. This is a more rigorous argument coming from Wilson loop. So this is a straightforward argument. While Wilson loop argument actually tells that the AT must be 0 at the horizon. Otherwise the Maxwell field will be singular. So the Wilson loop of AT around near the horizon is around a vanishing circle. So if it takes a finite value, it means that the Maxwell field should be divergent.
Well, I think that if phi is not 0 on the horizon, then that phi should put a hair on the horizon.
Yeah.
If you want to,
Yeah.
if you want, there is no hair.
Yeah,
but
at the
it's
horizon.
At the horizon,
Yeah.
then there shouldn't be any field there.
It is Maxwell, so that is,
No, but it is Maxwell scalar field. Phi is
No, this phi is the electric scalar potential. Okay. It's a max.
It's A0.
It's a potential, electric potential.
That can be
But
done
no,
zero.
no, but A0, then of course you can have a charge.
Any
But-
charge will tell you that A0 is non-zero.
A0 is non-zero. So
I
then
think what he is saying is that this 80 or so, it is differential equation,
no.
right? And with the backward modeling form. So there is a Hilbert space. Unless this operator like this, maybe 80 or any field, unless it is self-adjoint, you cannot make a quantum field theory in between. So that has to be analyzed, not by saying something is 0, something is not 0, but by looking at the domain of that operator.
I think, yeah, this
Systematic way of doing it.
I think this has to be looked at carefully because I think this has to be looked at carefully.
There is a systematic way.
So let's thank the speaker once again.